The courtroom fell silent the instant she spoke. "I speak 9 languages," said the young black woman in handcuffs. Judge Harrison Foster blinked, then laughed. A cold, echoing laugh rolled across the room like thunder. "9 languages," he scoffed. "Miss Williams, this is a courtroom, not a talent show." Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Kesha Williams stood tall, brown eyes unflinching, every movement calm and deliberate. Just 3 days earlier, she'd been dragged from her small Atlanta home in front of neighbors and news crews, accused of forging diplomas to work as a translator for international companies. Prosecutor Marcus Thompson, crisp suit and colder smile, flipped through his papers. "Your Honor, she claims fluency in English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Arabic, German, Russian, Japanese, and Portuguese. But she only has a high school diploma. The fraud is obvious." "It's true I don't have any degrees," Kesha said evenly. "But that doesn't mean I'm lying." The judge's grin faltered. "Miss Williams, stop this embarrassment. We have proof you charged thousands for services you couldn't possibly provide." "With respect, Your Honor," she replied, straightening despite the cuffs, "you're judging me without hearing me. Allow me to demonstrate." "Demonstrate?" Foster barked. "What will you do, recite the Chinese alphabet?" In the gallery, defense attorney Dr. Elena Rodriguez clenched her jaw. She had warned her client not to insist on this, but Kesha had refused. She wanted to prove the truth. "Your Honor," Rodriguez said firmly, "if my client claims these abilities, why not let her show them?" Foster adjusted his glasses, annoyed. "Because it's absurd. Look at her, young, black, no degree, raised in the projects. How could she possibly speak 9 languages?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Every eye turned toward the judge. Kesha didn't move. Her gaze stayed steady, patient, dangerous in its calm. "Your Honor," she said softly, "you've just proven exactly why I'm here. Not because I lied, but because this world refuses to believe that someone like me can be extraordinary." The words hit like a gavel. The cameras caught every second, the laugh, the prejudice, the moment the balance of power began to shift. The judge's laughter died, but the echo lingered like smoke. Then, silence. A heavy, dangerous silence that wrapped around the courtroom. Reporters froze, fingers hovering over their keyboards. Every camera light stayed fixed on Kesha. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was the first to move. She stood sharply, voice cutting through the air. "Your Honor, I request that your last comment be stricken from the record, and that you issue a formal apology." Her tone was firm, not loud, the kind that forces a man to listen. Judge Foster straightened, hiding behind arrogance. "Doctor," he said, forcing a smile, "I merely stated a statistical reality. How many people from her background master 9 languages? Let's be realistic." Murmurs swept through the gallery. The jurors shifted. Cameras zoomed in. The arrogance in his voice was poison, and everyone could feel it. Kesha stayed motionless, her breathing measured. Her fists tightened inside the cuffs. For a moment, her eyes closed, as if reaching for a memory that gave her strength. Then came the prosecutor's voice, slick and opportunistic. "Your Honor, 3 multinational corporations hired the defendant. Global Tech lost a $2 million contract because of her faulty Mandarin translations. Diplomatic Solutions had legal documents rejected for errors in French and Arabic. And the International Aid Foundation, its proposal to the UN was dismissed because her Russian translation was a joke." Each word hit like a whip. The audience's disbelief grew heavier with every accusation. But Kesha didn't flinch. She looked almost sad, like someone watching a scene she'd already lived too many times. "Miss Williams," Foster said, leaning forward, tone suddenly paternal, "you have a chance to admit your mistakes and accept a plea deal. Be honest." That was when Kesha smiled. Not out of fear, but with quiet power. A smile that said, "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "Your Honor," she said softly, "may I ask a question about these companies?" Thompson frowned. "What question?" When did global tech realize my work was wrong? Before or after they discovered I had no college degree? The question cut through the air. Thompson flipped through his notes, flustered. That's irrelevant. And diplomatic solutions? Kesha continued. Did they reject my translation before or after they found out I grew up in Mechanicsville? The name dropped like a stone. Mechanicsville. The poorest housing project in Atlanta. The air in the room shifted, jurors looked down, ashamed to meet her eyes. Dr. Rodriguez rose again. Objection, Your Honor. My client is addressing potential discrimination. Overruled, Foster snapped. Her background doesn't excuse fraud. Kesha tilted her head slightly. You said it's statistically unlikely for someone like me to speak 9 languages. May I ask, how many people like me have you actually spoken to, Your Honor? The judge flushed red. Miss Williams, you're testing my patience. I'm not testing anything, she replied quietly. I'm simply trying to understand whether this court judges competence or appearance. The words landed like a slap. No one dared to breathe. And then, from the gallery, an elderly woman rose slowly, Mrs. Chun, a retired teacher. Her eyes widened with recognition. She whispered to the person beside her, I know that girl. As if sensing it, Kesha turned. Their eyes met, a flicker of shared history. Mrs. Chun reached for her phone and began typing fast. Meanwhile, the prosecutor tried to recover. Your Honor, regardless of the defendants, interesting sociology, we have expert reports proving her incompetence. Experts? Kesha repeated, with a faint, knowing smile. I'd love to meet them, especially the ones who reviewed my Beijing dialects, or compared Moroccan and Egyptian Arabic, or academic Russian to commercial Russian. The gallery stirred. Several linguists leaned forward, eyes wide. That wasn't the voice of a liar. That was the voice of a woman who knew exactly what she was talking about. Mrs. Chun's fingers moved fast across her phone screen. I found Kesha Williams, she typed. It's her. Get everything ready now. She hit send, and Destiny began to move. Judge Foster, red-faced and losing control, slammed his gavel. Enough. This ridiculous show is over. I'll schedule the trial. One moment, Your Honor. A calm, commanding voice sliced through the tension. The doors opened. A tall, elegant man entered, gray at the temples, posture straight, eyes sharp with quiet authority. His suit was flawless, his presence magnetic. I'm Dr. James Morrison, he said, walking forward. Retired ambassador to the United Nations. He stopped beside Kesha, facing the judge. I apologize for the interruption, but I believe I have information relevant to this case. The room went still. Foster frowned. Dr. Morrison, this is a court in session. You can't just. Your Honor, Morrison interrupted gently, his voice calm but iron hard. I've worked with translators and interpreters for 3 decades on diplomatic missions across the world. I can testify under oath that I know the work of Kesha Williams personally. The silence was absolute. Kesha looked at him, surprise flickering across her face, then relief. The entire courtroom froze. Thompson leapt to his feet. Objection. This man isn't a registered witness. But Morrison had already opened his briefcase. I have here official documents from the United Nations, signed and sealed, he said evenly, proving that Miss Williams has served as a freelance translator on 3 humanitarian missions over the past 2 years. Her work was not only acceptable, it was exceptional. A ripple went through the gallery. Every camera pointed at him. Every journalist leaned forward. Foster swallowed hard, speechless for the first time. Thompson rifled through his papers, desperate and failing to find a way to discredit him. Kesha closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a deep breath. When she opened them, something in her expression changed, no longer defense, but command. Your Honor, she said quietly, I'll accept your offer of a demonstration, but not as a spectacle. Not as your entertainment. Her gaze swept across the courtroom, the smug judge, the pale prosecutor, the hopeful lawyer, the crowd that had come to watch her fall. If this court truly seeks justice, then allow me to demonstrate not only that I speak 9 languages, but why 3 powerful corporations would lie to destroy a young black woman who dared to compete in their world. The tension was electric. No one moved. No one breathed. Because what they didn't know, what not even her lawyer knew, was that those 3 days in jail had not been spent in despair. Kesha had made calls, activated contacts, set in motion a plan years in the making, a plan that would turn this trial into the most devastating exposure of institutional bias the American justice system had ever seen. Every humiliation had been fuel, every insult a spark. And now, the fire was about to begin. 2 hours later, the session was suspended. The courtroom emptied, but the tension didn't fade. It followed Kesha down the hallway like a shadow. Guards escorted her into a private room. Inside, 3 figures were waiting. At the table sat Mrs. Chun, calm, composed, eyes gleaming with something between pride and urgency. Beside her, a young Asian man typed furiously on a laptop. Across from them, an elegant black woman was organizing a thick pile of documents with military precision. Kesha froze. Mrs. Chun? The teacher stood, smiling through tears. You've grown so much, she said softly. Do you still remember the Mandarin classes at the community library? The memory hit Kesha like a wave, the dusty shelves, the soft hum of fluorescent lights, the kindness in that woman's eyes. She was 14 again, sitting in the front row, hungry to learn. Every Friday, she had shown up without fail, absorbing Mandarin, French, and German faster than anyone Mrs. Chun had ever taught. Teacher Chun, Kesha whispered, her composure breaking for the first time. I thought you'd left Atlanta. I did, Mrs. Chun said gently. I moved to China. Worked as an educational consultant for 5 years. And when international organizations needed a multilingual freelancer, she smiled, I recommended you. The young man looked up from his screen. I'm Daniel Park, he said. Cybersecurity specialist. Professor Chun hired me to investigate the companies accusing you, and what we found will blow this case wide open. The woman at the end of the table closed her folder. Her voice was steady, precise. I'm Dr. Victoria Johnson, corporate litigation expert. Kesha, while you were in jail, we've been building something bigger than a defense. We're going to expose a conspiracy, a network of discrimination targeting freelancers without academic pedigrees. Daniel turned his laptop to face Kesha. Rows of data, spreadsheets, and email chains filled the screen. Global tech, he said, has a pattern. They reject Black and Latino freelancers regardless of quality. Here, internal memos. Executives using phrases like questionable types. Dr. Johnson slid a photograph across the table. Diplomatic Solutions keeps 2 lists, a premium list for graduates from elite universities, and an experimental diversity list where they dump everyone else. They reject that work on purpose, labeling it incompetent. Kesha's jaw tightened. And the International Aid Foundation? Mrs. Chun sighed deeply. They rejected your Russian translation for being too literal, but your version was more accurate, more human. The Harvard translator they replaced you with sanitized every emotional detail. The UN rejected that version for sounding cold. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Kesha, they didn't just discredit your work. They turned your authenticity into a flaw. They couldn't accept that someone like you could do it better. For the next hour, the room pulsed with energy. Emails, documents, voice recordings, every piece of evidence painted the same picture. Daniel's digital trail, Mrs. Chun's letters, Dr. Johnson's legal strategy, all part of one weapon. Finally, Mrs. Chun opened a thick envelope and slid it across the table. You're not alone, she said softly. We found 12 other translators, Black, Latino, Asian, sabotaged in the exact same way. Kesha opened the envelope. Inside were letters, handwritten, trembling lines of anger and hope. Each one told the same story. Exceptional talent dismissed. Work questioned. Contracts canceled the moment credentials were checked. You did all this in 3 days? She asked, stunned. Daniel smiled faintly. No, he said. Mrs. Chun has been working on this for 2 years. Your arrest was just the spark we needed to set the truth on fire. 2 hours later, the session was suspended. The courtroom emptied, but the tension didn't fade. It followed Kesha down the hallway like a shadow. Guards escorted her into a private room. Inside, 3 figures were waiting. At the table sat Mrs. Chun, calm, composed, eyes gleaming with something between pride and urgency. Beside her, a young Asian man typed furiously on a laptop. Across from them, an elegant black woman was organizing a thick pile of documents with military precision. Kesha froze. Mrs. Chun? The teacher stood, smiling through tears. You've grown so much, she said softly. Do you still remember the Mandarin classes at the community library? The memory hit Kesha like a wave, the dusty shelves, the soft hum of fluorescent lights, the kindness in that woman's eyes. She was 14 again, sitting in the front row, hungry to learn. Every Friday, she had shown up without fail, absorbing Mandarin, French, and German faster than anyone Mrs. Chun had ever taught. Teacher Chun, Kesha whispered, her composure breaking for the first time. I thought you'd left Atlanta. I did, Mrs. Chun said gently. I moved to China. Worked as an educational consultant for 5 years. And when international organizations needed a multilingual freelancer, she smiled, I recommended you. The young man looked up from his screen. I'm Daniel Park, he said. Cybersecurity specialist. Professor Chun hired me to investigate the companies accusing you, and what we found will blow this case wide open. The woman at the end of the table closed her folder. Her voice was steady, precise. I'm Dr. Victoria Johnson, corporate litigation expert. Kesha, while you were in jail, we've been building something bigger than a defense. We're going to expose a conspiracy, a network of discrimination targeting freelancers without academic pedigrees. Daniel turned his laptop to face Kesha. Rows of data, spreadsheets, and email chains filled the screen. Global tech, he said, has a pattern. They reject Black and Latino freelancers regardless of quality. Here, internal memos. Executives using phrases like questionable types. Dr. Johnson slid a photograph across the table. Diplomatic Solutions keeps 2 lists, a premium list for graduates from elite universities and an experimental diversity list where they dump everyone else. They reject that work on purpose, labeling it incompetent. Kesha's jaw tightened. And the International Aid Foundation? Mrs. Chun sighed deeply. They rejected your Russian translation for being too literal, but your version was more accurate, more human. The Harvard translator they replaced you with sanitized every emotional detail. The UN rejected that version for sounding cold. Dr. Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Kesha, they didn't just discredit your work. They turned your authenticity into a flaw. They couldn't accept that someone like you could do it better. For the next hour, the room pulsed with energy. Emails, documents, voice recordings, every piece of evidence painted the same picture. Daniel's digital trail, Mrs. Chun's letters, Dr. Johnson's legal strategy, all part of one weapon. Finally, Mrs. Chun opened a thick envelope and slid it across the table. You're not alone, she said softly. We found 12 other translators, Black, Latino, Asian, sabotaged in the exact same way. Kesha opened the envelope. Inside were letters, handwritten, trembling lines of anger and hope. Each one told the same story. Exceptional talent dismissed. Work questioned. Contracts canceled the moment credentials were checked. You did all this in 3 days? She asked, stunned. Daniel smiled faintly. No, he said. Mrs. Chun has been working on this for 2 years. Your arrest was just the spark we needed to set the truth on fire. The silence lingered, thick and electric. Judge Foster adjusted his robe with trembling hands, sweat beading on his forehead. What he didn't know was that every arrogant word he'd spoken earlier, every laugh, every smirk, was already viral. Millions were watching. And justice was about to turn its gaze on him. He cleared his throat. "Very well," he said stiffly. "If you insist on this demonstration, proceed." Kesha rose slowly. Her cuffs were gone. For a heartbeat, she just stood there, eyes closed, breathing in the moment. When she opened them, her gaze was steady as steel. "Before I begin, Your Honor," she said, "there's something the court should see." From the gallery, Daniel Park stood, carrying a portable projector. He pressed play. The lights dimmed. On the wall appeared a WhatsApp exchange, names, dates, messages glowing in green and gray. Kesha spoke calmly, her voice filling the room. "These are internal messages between global tech executives. The date, 2 weeks after my translation was delivered and approved by their Chinese partners. Read what they say." Foster leaned forward, squinting. His lips moved as he read aloud. "She delivered perfect work, but we can't pay freelancers without degrees. Make up an excuse and cancel." A wave of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Reporters typed like thunder. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Thompson jumped up, his face pale. These messages could be fabricated. Kesha tilted her head, calm and sharp. "Mr. Prosecutor, do you speak Mandarin?" He faltered. "That's irrelevant." "It's not," she said. "Because my Chinese partners do." She turned to the gallery. "Professor Chun, would you read their review aloud, please?" Mrs. Chun rose, adjusting her glasses, and began reading in flawless Mandarin. Her tone carried the weight of decades of teaching, graceful, confident, undeniable. When she finished, Kesha translated softly, her voice like silk but cutting through the silence. They wrote, "This is the most culturally sensitive and technically accurate translation we've received in 5 years. The translator understands not only the words but the intentions behind them. We highly recommend her services." *. The judge's eyes flickered. His voice cracked. "How can we confirm this translation is accurate?" And then, a new voice from the doorway. "I can confirm it myself." All heads turned. An elegant Asian man stepped forward, posture straight, eyes calm as stone. "Dr. Li Wei," he announced, Director of International Relations, Beijing Trade Corporation. "I came as soon as I heard what was happening to Miss Williams." He approached the stand, his voice unwavering. "I've worked with Miss Williams on multiple projects. Her proficiency, not only in Mandarin but in regional dialects, is beyond extraordinary." A stunned silence filled the room. Even the prosecutor's papers slipped from his hands. But Kesha wasn't finished. "You mentioned the problems with Arabic and Russian, didn't you, Mr. Thompson?" she said softly. Daniel Park pressed play again. A new audio clip echoed across the room, the voice of the CEO of the International Aid Foundation. "Her translation was technically perfect," the CEO said, "but too emotional. We replaced it with one from a Harvard professor. The UN rejected ours for sounding artificial." Gasps spread through the audience. Foster sat frozen, color draining from his face. His courtroom, once a symbol of his authority, had become a stage for his exposure. Every lie, every prejudice, every ounce of arrogance was now being dismantled in front of the world. Kesha stood at the center, the light from the projector painting her silhouette on the wall behind her. For the first time, she didn't look like the accused. She looked like justice itself. The courtroom was silent. Every flash had stopped. Every whisper had died. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade as Kesha stepped forward. For a moment, she simply stood there, tall, centered, breathing deeply like an athlete before the final race. Then she began. Her voice slipped into Arabic, smooth, melodic, lyrical. Without pause, she shifted to German, discussing philosophy with flawless precision. Then to French, singing a single verse of a poem that hung in the air like perfume. Russian followed, dense and powerful, carrying the echo of emotion and intellect intertwined. Each transition was seamless. Each language, alive. She wasn't performing, she was revealing herself. The entire room sat spellbound. Even the journalists forgot to type. The guards near the door had stopped breathing. When she finally stopped, the silence was sacred. Then Dr. Lee broke it, softly, respectfully. In my 20 years of evaluating interpreters and linguists, he said, I have never witnessed such mastery, not in any university, not in any government agency. Judge Foster sat stiffly, his face white, his phone vibrating nonstop. Messages from superiors, from the ethics department, from civil rights organizations, all watching, all recording. Kesha looked at him, her expression calm, almost serene. Your Honor, she said, for 3 days, I thought about revenge, about making those who humiliated me feel the same pain. But I realized something. She paused, letting her words fall one by one like heavy stones. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's truth. Her eyes met his. The kind of truth that strips every lie bare, until the world can finally see what it tried so hard not to. The line hit like lightning. Cameras zoomed in. Foster's advisor leaned in close, whispering urgently in his ear. The judge swallowed hard. His voice was trembling. Miss Williams, all charges against you are dropped. He hesitated, then added, quieter, broken, this court extends a formal apology for the treatment you received. Kesha gave a small nod. Apology accepted. The prosecutor, Thompson, was already typing frantically on his phone, sweat running down his temple, his career disintegrating in real time. Cameras flashed again, capturing his pale face, his shaking hands. But Kesha remained calm, almost too calm. Because this victory, as sweet as it was, wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something bigger. A reckoning. A change that no one in that courtroom could yet imagine. 6 months later, sunlight poured through the glass walls of the United Nations headquarters in New York. The city glimmered below, calm, unaware of how much one woman had already changed its story. Behind a wide desk sat Kesha Williams. Her nameplate gleamed under the light, Director of Global Humanitarian Translations. Stacks of documents surrounded her, not indictments, but projects for hope, missions for peace. The same cameras that once captured her humiliation now followed her triumph. Her salary was 3 times higher than any American corporation had ever offered. Her name, once mocked, now carried the weight of respect. Judge Harrison Foster, the man who laughed in her face, had been forced into early retirement. A federal ethics investigation uncovered years of bias buried in his rulings. The same arrogance that once made him powerful had turned into the evidence that destroyed him. Prosecutor Marcus Thompson lost everything. His law license was revoked after investigators discovered fabricated evidence in several past cases involving minority defendants. And the corporations that had accused her, Global Tech, Diplomatic Solutions, and the International Aid Foundation, all paid the price. Multi-million-dollar settlements. Mandatory diversity programs. Public apologies broadcast worldwide. But Kesha never celebrated their downfall. She didn't need to. Her victory had already become something greater, a spark that ignited a movement. Translators, writers, engineers, artists, people who had been overlooked, underestimated, silenced, began to speak up. Within a year, more than 100 companies had rewritten their hiring policies. The wave had begun. At the heart of it stood one name. Kesha Williams. Across the ocean, Mrs. Chun had opened the Kesha Williams Institute for Unconventional Talent, a sanctuary for gifted young people without formal credentials. A place where brilliance was measured not by diplomas, but by courage, effort, and heart. In an international interview, Kesha sat under bright studio lights, her voice calm and confident. The best revenge, she said, isn't destroying those who doubted you. It's building something so extraordinary that they spend the rest of their lives wondering how they could have been so blind. The audience fell silent. Her words echoed, not as anger, but as truth. because Judge Foster had tried to destroy her. But in doing so, he exposed an entire system of prejudice and fear. And Kesha Williams proved that real power doesn't come from framed diplomas or famous names. It comes from turning every doubt, every insult, every injustice into fuel for greatness. When truth finally finds its voice, it speaks in every language. And the world listens.